Kלים Perek Vov Mishnah Aleph. Before we start this Perek, let's just recap and see where we're up to in the Masechta. This part of the Masechta deals with Kli, and we know that Kli is different from all other Kelim in that it is Mekabel Tumah Me Aviroi. That means if the sheretz is placed, hung, suspended in its avir, in its toich, the Kli becomes Tomei. And similarly, the Kli is able to be Metame, also Me Aviroi. But Kli follows other Kelim, normal Kelim, with the usual rule that if the Kli is Mechuber Lekarka, like any other Kelim which is Mechuber Lekarka, it's not able to be Mekabel Tumah. But there is a very important exception to this rule. There is a type of Kli which the Torah says specifically it's Mekabel Tumah, even though it's Mechuber Lekarka, and that's called Tanur V'Kira. Tanur V'Kiraim, the Pasuk says in Shmini, these are ovens and stoves. These Kelim are Mekabel Tumah, even though they are Mechuber Lekarka. The way a Tanur V'Kiraim is made, one is mechaber it to the karka with tit, with mud. And there's a difference between a tanur and a kira. A tanur is an oven, as we've shown in the pictures many times, and it's used for baking. One places the bread inside the oven. However, the kira is a stove. One doesn't put anything inside the kira. The kira has a toich, but one places a kadeira on top of the kira, on top of the stove. And these two kelim we've discussed in the previous two prokim. The Torah is now telling us that in the case of kira, the kira doesn't have to be a complete keli in the sense of a normal stove. Just finding you a picture of the kira. Here is a picture of the kira. There you see a picture of the kira with a pot on top. Now we're going to start Perek Vav. This Mishnah deals specifically with kira. This is a special exception to the rule that a kira has to be whole. The way that you can also make a kira is actually having a little tripod. Just a tripod. They're called pitputim, 3 legs. That's all there is. You've got your ground, and you have your 3 legs sitting on the ground, and on the 3 legs you put your k'deira, your pot. With a tanur, you can't do this. A tanur must have what's called a roiv hekef. You must have most of the circumference of the tanur to be considered a tanur. However, with kira, you don't need roiv hekef. It's enough just to have shloisha pitputim, 3 legs standing by themselves, and the stove, the pot is placed on top of these 3 legs. These 3 legs act as a tripod. But the important yesod of this Mishnah is that a kira made up as a tripod, made up of shloisha pitputim, is only considered to be a kira if these 3 individual legs are mechuber batit. The chibur batit could be at the bottom. In other words, the 3 legs are stuck into the ground with tit. That's one way of learning the Mishnah. The other way is the way the Baal Tanura learns, and other Rishonim, that the chibur batit actually takes place at the top of the 3 legs. So you have your 3 legs coming up, and then you're mechaber the 3 of them with a circle of mud, with a circle of tit. I'll show you the picture from Tavanis HaKelim. And you can see it here. There are your 3 legs, and there's your chibur batit. Says the Mishnah, a person puts these 3 legs on the ground for chibron batit, and he joins, we'll learn with the Perish the Baal Tanura that the chibur batit is on the top. It actually doesn't make a difference which way you learn. The Tosefta allows both. But the chibur batit, Baal Tanura explains, is on top. The 3 legs are joined with a chibur of tit. Liyos shoifes alein es hakadera, in order to be able to place the kadera on top of this tripod. And the din is tumea. These three legs, because they are mechuba batit, because the essential ingredient of a kira is that it is made from cheres, which is really earth, mud, which is after it's been had a hesek, has been fired. It doesn't make a difference what material the pitputin themselves are. It's the chibur batit which turns it into a kira shel cheres. And in such a case, the three legs have a din of kira, and the toich of the kira is defined by the area enclosed by the three legs. That's the reisha of the Mishnah. So again, the important part of this din is that it's not the material of the pitputin themselves that create the Shem Kira. It's the fact that the chibur batit, tit being turned into cheres after the hesek, that gives it the shame of a kira shel cheres, and then the area enclosed by the tripod is considered to be a kira. And if a sheretz, for instance, were to be suspended in that enclosed area, then the three legs with the chibur batit are considered to be a kira, and this new kira, this unusually shaped kira, is Tommy. The Mishnah carries on. Kova shloisha masmerin ba'oretz lios shoifes alein akdeira. Instead of making pitputim, which is a word used for the little legs, the tripod, happen to be made out of cheres, out of mud themselves. But instead of using mud, you used metal nails. Now, as we said before, the material of the pitputin themselves, whether they are cheres and called pitputin, or they are made out of metal and called masmerin, is actually irrelevant to the din, because the main part which creates the Shem Kira is the chibur batit at the top. But the Mishnah is telling you a din of masmerin without the din of chibur batit. Kovash loisha masmerin, you place three nails, three big screws on the ground. Lios shoifes alein akdera, to put a kadera on top. But you were not mechaber, the top of the masmerin, together with tit. So now, because you weren't mechaber them together with tit, that's why the din is going to be tahira, as we'll see. And who are din, if you used pitputin shel tit or pitputin shel cheres, and you weren't mechaber the top with tit, the same din applies, it's tahira. It's the chibur batit only that makes it into kira. The only reason why the Mishnah uses masmerin in this case, says the Rosh, because masmerin are actually better to be able to form a seating place at the top for the kadera, but you're not mechaber it batit. That's what the Mishnah is saying. Although you do a very formal seating, on top you make the nails a bit wider so that a pot can sit comfortably on top, although it's actually more sturdy and acts better as a kira, but because you haven't got your chibur batit, it's tahira. So the only reason why it says masmerin made out of metal is because the metal actually is better for forming a little seat onto which you can place your kadera. But nevertheless, because you haven't got your chibur batit, it's tahira. So in other words, although it seems that the reisha and the sefer make a chilik between whether the legs are pitputin or the legs are masmerin, in other words, are the legs made out of cheres or the legs made out of metal, that's not the defining point of the Mishnah. The main difference between the reisha and the sefer is, in the reisha it says the words for chibron batit, in other words, you cemented or stuck the top of the pitputin with tit. In the sefer, the masmerin, you didn't do it. There's no tit. That's why the din is tahira. The reason why it says masmerin, because the Mishnah wants to say the words afal pish osa b'roisha mokem shetei kaderi yesheves, and that's actually easier and more likely to be in the case of masmerin, where you can actually form the metal into a little seating pod for the pot. But nevertheless, because you haven't got your chibur batit, that's why it hasn't got a shem kira. And that's why the Mishnah says tahira. That's a little bit complicated. And the Mishnah carries on, Hoise shtei avonim kira. Instead of having 3 legs, you take 2 big stones and make them your stove. That's all you do. Just 2 stones. And again, a kira must be made out of cheres. So of course the 2 stones themselves cannot be a kira. That's why the Mishnah carries on, v'chibron batit. And then you join up these 2 stones with tit, with mud. Then tamea, then these 2 stones with the mud will become a new kira. Just like in the Reisha, it's the chibur batit, after of course the hesek, which is always required for a kira, to make it, to fire it. These 2 avonim with the chibur batit at the top will become a kira. So in the case of pitputzim, where they're very thin, you can make a kira with 3 with the chibur batit. But avonim, which are much larger, Tanakama holds, as long as you have your chibur batit, 2 is enough. Rabbi Yehuda Matayr, he says, even with avonim, ad sheyase shlishis, you've got to make 3 stones, just like in the case of the Reisha, 3 pitputim with a chibur batit makes into a kira. Rabbi Yehuda holds, even though you're using avonim, you've got to have 3 avonim with a chibur batit at the top. But he says, I'm a little bit lenient here. Instead of using a 3rd even, if you want, you can have 2 avonim. But you put the 2 avonim next to a wall, so that when you put the pot on the 2 stones, the pot is also supported by the walls. The wall can actually act as the pitput shlishi, as the 3rd required leg for the kira. And of course, you need a chibur batit between the 2 stones and the wall. That's how Rabbi Yehuda learns. The Mishnah carries on, achas betit v'achas shloi betit tahira. We're dealing here with the 2 stones, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you need 3 stones, or 2 stones and a wall, and you need all 3 to be mechuba betit. If, however, achas betit v'achas shloi betit actually means, according to this parish, that you connected 2 of the stones, or 2 of the legs, betit. The 3rd one is left unconnected, so the tit is only mechaber 2 and is not mechaber all 3, and that's called achas betit v'achas shloi betit. Then tahira, you haven't got your kira, because the kira has only got a shem kira if you mechaber all 3 supports with the tit being made into cheres after the first hesek, and that's how you have your kira shel cheres, by having 3 legs with a chibur betit at the top.